Okay, Mike, one of the things I guess that's really key before you start running a train in a layout area is to know what kind of throttle you're using. What kind are you using here today?
Well, that's right, Chris. I see you use Digitrax on your layout and you have a DT400 throttle. And what I'm looking for is I want to see what the important keys are. I want to see how I acquire a locomotive. I want to see how I can make it go forward or reverse. I want to know my direction areas.
I guess a lot of people, when they come to a layout and they see a system they've never operated before, they get a little bit nervous or feel like a dummy if they ask somebody, you know, how do I acquire a locomotive? Is that,
Exactly.
is that a common feeling?
I think it's even common among experienced modelers.
Yeah.
I own Digitrax on my layout, but if I run a layout with a lens throttle, I know the throttle is unique to mine, but it has many similarities, and it just takes a few minutes to get comfortable with it. And I asked the layout owner to show you how to operate the throttle, and then you'll end up in a comfort zone. I see you have two encoders here, so obviously I can control two trains, and I see there's a train in the yard there in Shelby Yard, and it's already addressed 5608, and I check my train. I think that's really important. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the bell button, press it, to see, okay, I know that that's the train. I'm just making verification. I'll blow my horn. There's the long, and I'll try the short horn button, and that works. And I'll make sure I have a light on.
Okay, so now you're sitting there ready to depart to depart for the main. What are some of the things you want to do before you just head out? Do you just rush right out and get going, or what?
No, sirree, Chris. The first thing I want to do is contact dispatch and request clearance to head out onto the main. And only when that clearance is granted will I check my turnouts up ahead. That's critical. You just don't start running the train until you check what's happening ahead of you.
Yeah.
It's kind of like steering a car in a sense. So I see that the dispatch has given me clearance to start, but I'm not going to head out until I make sure that I can get on the main. So I see the main is set for the main, but I need to set it for that track that I'm on in Shelby. So now that I'm set, my conductor's set the turnouts, I'm going to blow the horn, and I'm going to head out. I've got the bell on because I'm in a yard, and the yard is where there could be some employees working. And we're heading out onto the main.
So another thing that you probably should do before you leave is to check your consist against either your car cards or whatever to make sure that you got all the cars you're supposed to have.
That's right. Always do. I check my switch lists, and in different layouts they could be given to me in a different format. I may be given a card for every car, and I have to carry it in a pocket. Or I'll just be given a switch list, and I'll just verify before I leave town. So
knowing the cars that you have on your train gives you better preparation in terms of what you may be doing as you're going down the line.
I want to know where those cars are going.
Now this one is classified as a way freight. What does that mean?
Well, a way freight, there's a lot of general merchandise on this. I'll be stopping in a lot of places along the route. But if you excuse me, Chris, before I leave town, I'm going to set my switch back to the main now that I've left Shelby Yard. Well, my conductor, if I'm the engineer, my conductor would do that for me. He'd be carrying the lists and that. So this train will be going around the layout. It'll be traveling to all the different places on the layout, and it'll be dropping traffic and picking up traffic along the route.
Okay, thank you for that. It sounds like it's going to be quite an interesting train. Maybe what we'll do now with that train is look at some of the problems that it would encounter and sort of familiarize the audience a bit with some of the thinking processes to simplify what's going on.
For sure, that'd be great.
At the yard throat here at Shelby, and soon there will be a way freight approaching, the one that Mike's operating, and what we're going to do here is go through some of the thinking that has to go on and preparation for and actually doing some drop-offs and pickups in this yard.
That's right, Chris. The train I'm in control of is just coming around the big bend and about to enter Shelby Yard. So I've realized my train is too long for any of the yard tracks, so I'm going to contact dispatch requesting permission and clearance onto the main and to use the main as my switching track.
So it's arriving here on the inside main. What are you also looking for in terms of this train's arrival?
Well, I've blown the whistle 2 or 3 times and I've got the bell on. Whenever a train runs through a large yard or a yard of any nature on a railroad, You won't have that bell going. There's a passenger station down there in the distance, but there are also yard employees working on coupling cars in the yard, and they need to be able to hear a train. So the bell has to be on at all times. So you can see that our train is too long for the sidings and even for the main in town. So we're going to use the main as our switching lead.
So how are you going to solve problems here in terms of being able to do your switching and still allow access for other trains that are needing to get through?
That's a critical question, Chris. We don't want to have any trains coming in Shelby from either direction coming into the back end or the front end of us. So we will reroute traffic using the crossovers outside of Shelby in both directions.
Okay, so let's go and set those switches.
So Chris, we're at the crossovers on the double main line to the north of Shelby. So we're on the inside main with our train in Shelby Yard. So we want to reroute traffic off the inside main, and we want to take it to the outer main there. So any trains coming along the inside will be routed around our traffic.
And if there's trains approaching on the outside main, you'd want to make sure that that switch on the outside main is still set so that they can go through.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, great. And there's still another end, obviously.
We have to go to the south end of Shelby. So we're to the south of Shelby, and here's the other crossover on the main. So here's the inside main where our train is residing in Shelby. So I want to throw the switches from the inside to the outer main to reroute traffic. So trains will be safely rerouted around our train, and they'll be on the outer main going through Shelby Yard while we're residing on the inner main or the inside main.
Now, this is kind of known as, in a similar circumstance, when you only have a single track main line, as sort of a passing siding circumstance.
That's right, yeah. So we're ensuring that the traffic flows and that there are no collisions on the railroad.
Okay, that's great. So what I'm going to do now is complicate matters a little bit by allowing a train to actually flow to that outside, and we'll see what's happening.
That'd be fine.
So now you're at that crossing, the important crossing, and there isn't a train that's approaching and will be needed to be rerouted.
That's right, Chris. I see that there's a long coal drag coming. It's in the southbound direction, but we don't want it on the inside main, so we've thrown our turnouts at the crossover here, and we're rerouting this train, and it's going to the outer main, farther away from where we're standing. And it'll safely bypass us at Shelby Yard.
I guess the other thing is it's coming out of a yard down here. What are we going to have to do with the tail end here?
Well, the crew that's operating this train, when it leaves the long lead coming out of the yard, we'll have to throw this back to the main. There's a turnout right here, just past the road. And once the last car goes, the conductor on that train will ensure that that switch is turned back to the main. And I've thrown it back to the main for safekeeping.
Now the operator of this train, he's going through this double crossover that's been set for him. What happens here after it goes through?
Well, once the train's finished, the crossover will be set back to the main.
It's pretty important because there may be another train coming on that outside main that'll have to use that.
That's right, Chris, and that's a cardinal rule of model railroading. Always turn your switches, your turnouts back to the main once you've gone through anything.
Where you've done your work.
Yeah.
And if you're occupying it, you make sure those other guys know about it.
Yeah, it's called communication. Very important. Comes the coal drag again, Chris, and as you see earlier we set the switches back to the main outside of Shelby to the south, and here's the coal drag, and it's returning back to the inner main or the inside main
where it belongs.
And where it belongs as it reaches the yard in Edmonton.
That way it avoided your train completely, and you now can get around to doing your work.
And this train has its commodities going, and we didn't stall traffic at all.
So here we are at the front end of the train here at Shelby Yard, and Mike is going to do a switching sequence. What's the first steps that you really want to do before you start moving the train?
Well, I want to look at my switch list to see which cars I have to lift out of Shelby. And I've identified the two cars. They're in the train. I see this Boston and Maine car. And I'm just looking at the last three digits, 045. Even though it's 79045, on my list it's easier and quicker to just check the last three digits. This Duluth, Winnipeg, and Pacific boxcar, DWP, last 3 digits 646. So these are the 2 cars I've identified that I have to lift.
Okay, so did you look at your list to see if you had anything to drop off?
Oh, I sure did, and I have a couple of cars to drop, and they're rail box cars, and I see them further back in the train. But normally, I'd make the cut behind the farthest car in the back, but I'm not going to walk all the way down the yard. That would take too long. So, in tandem with my engineer, I'm going to ask him to move ahead and bring those cut of cars forward. We've blown the horn to indicate that we're on the move, and we've got the bell going in the yard.
So the other nice thing about this is that with the train so difficult to see, with the tracks occupied in front, you're not really too concerned about the car number until it becomes visible down here. And you can double check that, eh?
And I've looked, I just perused the whole train, and I know what a rail box car looks like. It's the bright yellow ones. And the only drops for Shelby are the 2 rail box. So of course I'm going to be making my cut behind the second car.
Now, drawing the whole train here before you uncouple, there's an advantage to that, obviously, in terms of just time and space.
Well, certainly, and for my brakeman, he's not walking the full length of the yard. I'm doing the walking for him as the engineer. And I've discovered the car, and my brakeman's going in, and he's uncoupling.
Okay.
So once we've uncoupled, I know I'm very comfortable with the yard lead north of Shelby. I won't crash into that train that's going by because I have a lengthy yard lead.
All right, so one of the things that people talk about all the time and that kind of gets them upset is that when they're in this circumstance, what is the order of events? I mean, there's so many issues with terminology. You've heard of things like cherry picking and so on and so forth. What is a cherry pick and why do you want to avoid it?
Well, that's a very good question, Chris. Cherry pick is where you just pick the first car behind the engine that's one of your drops, and then you pick the second one and the third one, you go on. By doing that, by picking the easiest one first, you're actually wasting a lot of time.
Okay.
What you want to do is you want to go to the farthest car in your train that has to be dropped.
Okay.
Make the cut there, pull forward, and then you're saving a lot of moves.
And I guess that's the same thing in terms of your lifts as well, eh?
Totally.
Okay, so you've identified your lift there as what's the deepest lift that you have to do?
Well, I've got my Boston and Maine here, and I got my DWP here, so this is my deepest lift. So I'm going to go, when I get the train on the move, I'm going to go and make my cut behind the DWP.
Okay, so let's do that now then. You're going to pull this obviously forward.
So, yeah, I'll just give a toot on the horn. And like I said, the yard lead is long enough that I'm comfortable that I'm not going to be interfering with those trains on the outer main.
Mm-hmm.
And once I clear the switch at the yard throat there, I'll be able to turn the switch. And if you look over here, Chris, you'll see that the train has plenty of lead left. Here's my locomotive here, and my lead goes all the way up to here, which gives me a considerable amount of space that I'm comfortable with the switching. So it's always good to know the length of your train and the length of your farthest car.
Okay. So now you've pulled your cut forward of the yard throat, and you're going to now do some sequences in order to get your cars and drop them off. So what are you going to do here, Mike?
Well, I'm going to align my switches, have my conductor go in and align my switches down to the specific track that I have to go in. So I've thrown my switch off the main, and then I see we have the first track here. So
you're going to go into the interchange track then?
Yes, that's right. And I'm going to blow the horn.
Yep.
One short toot, and we're heading in onto the interchange track where we interchange traffic.
Mm-hmm. So you're going to hook on to this big long string of cars and pull it forward again to try to reduce the distance so your poor switchman doesn't have to walk
miles. My
miles.
switchman would be standing about here.
Yeah.
And he's going to say 5 ties, 3 ties, you're on the pin, good to stop. And then he'll radio the engineer, say good to go ahead, and he'll pull the whole cut out, and we're looking for the farthest car, and we see there's our Boston and Maine, and there's our DWP, which is our farthest car. So we want to make our cut after the farthest car. We don't want to cherry pick and get the B&M car first. We'll be giving ourselves extra moves.
So that old switchman doesn't have to move very far. He's getting old,
He's still standing here.
Yeah.
Not that he's lazy, but Why bother expend the energy
Yeah, and time is money.
on the railroad?
And you find that the locomotive doesn't have to travel as much.
That's right. Less wear and tear on everything.
So when you're uncoupling there, I have a question just before we pull ahead there.
Yeah.
These little sticks that you're pushing into the coupler pockets, I know that some layout owners get a little peeved off because of the pressure people put on them, and they, they're worried about the coupler getting busted or whatever.
Yeah.
How do you do it in order to sort of keep it nice and easy? And
Well, I find, Chris, I just go down and right at a 90-degree angle and perpendicular. Put it right in the coupler pocket. I just put my finger on top of the boxcar in behind and just shove it forward slightly, and by pushing forward it'll release the coupler, and then I pull the engine forward as you saw me do there, and
so what you're doing is creating some slack there so you can actually get the stick in the hole.
That's right, exactly. Yeah. And you're always taking care. If it's your own railroad, you want your visitors to be gentle with your equipment. You're taking care to be gentle with their equipment as well, with the host's equipment.
So why are you doing the pulls first, the pickups first?
Well, we made the cut behind our drops already, and I know where my drop is, so it's easier for me to keep in my head where the rest of my train is. So I've come out of the throat, and I'm going to drop that DWMP.
Yeah.
And I know there's a car in between that and the other car, the LVN, the Lion Valley Northern. I'll know that he has to go back into the yard.
Yes. I guess the other thing too is that it allows you to open up some space in that track where you want to do your drops.
That's
so that
right, yeah.
If you did your drops first, you'd be doing double the work.
That's right.
And you'd have half the space.
Exactly. You always want to do it as efficiently, like a chess game. You want to do it in the least amount of moves and involving the least amount of space.
Well, there sure doesn't seem to be much stress and pressure doing it this way.
Very relaxing.
And the other thing I noticed too, that even though we're doing a bit of work here, it's happening quick, but you're not running your train back and forth at 90 miles an hour.
No, you want to do it at a realistic speed, and again, you want to be respectful of the host's equipment on their layout as well. And you go to freight yards, and sure, sometimes they might show off a little bit, but typically they're careful. They don't want to damage the coupler pockets that on the real gear. So this LVN we don't need, so I'm putting it back in the cut on the interchange yard.
You give it a little push there, eh?
Yeah.
Is that just to make sure that they don't recouple? Because I know gravity is not your friend sometimes.
Sometimes that happens, yeah.
Now this railroad, though, is built on the flat, so there's not much chance of that.
Yeah, you were wise to do that. My railroad's also built on the flat. And we also have to lift the Boston and Maine car. A little toot of the horn always before you head back. And by making the cut behind my drops, I see I've got my rail box cars there.
They're all ready to go in the yard.
They're all ready to go in the yard, but I know that the cars in between my two lifts also belong in the yard. They don't go on my train.
That's convenient, then you don't get confused. Eh?
That's right. Sometimes when you say, oh my gosh, where did those cars come from? But if you always follow the same procedure, the way you choose to do it, and Chris and I have this simplified procedure that we like, and it works all the time, we never are confused about cars that are on our train.
Yeah, because you always know if you put your drops in last, you'll know where to do the cut.
That's right.
And the rest, well, the heck with it, it just happens.
Exactly.
Too much information is too much information.
Exactly.
Unnecessary.
And it makes it fun.
So now you're just pushing everything back, including your drops.
Yeah, and my drops are the two rail box cars. Got my rail box cars safely in the yard. I'm going to make my cut. And then I'm going to pull out. And once I back these long tank cars onto the train, I'll have my train ready to head out of Shelby. I perform my drops and lifts.
Well, that sure didn't seem stressful.
Oh, it was a lot of fun. And this will repeat itself in another classification yard, another town along the road.
Okay, so now that we've gone through this sequence, let's see what happens in the big yard and talk a little bit about some of the complex switching problems.
Excellent.
A little bit of a summary and conclusion of what we learned about what goes on in a place like Shelby, some of the things that you really want to watch for.
Well, the most important thing is when you're coming off either of the main lines and you're entering Shelby Yard, you ought to make sure if you're a mainline train passing through that your tracks are lined up to run straight through on the main. If you're switching and you need to use the main, if your train's really long, you want to ensure that dispatch is okay, that you can use the main line to switch, and you want to set your turnouts to the north and the south, your crossovers, to allow traffic to go around your train. And then when switching out in the yard, you want to know which tracks are free, where you have a clear alley to drop cars and lift cars. And there's a lot of industries here as well that you have to contend with as well.
I think also, too, when you look at the actual switching itself, you don't have to get your brain wrapped around of identifying every single car in the yard to figure out what you want.
Just the farthest car, and you start from that. As Chris says, no cherry picking. Don't take the first car, because you'll be going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Take the farthest car, then you've got all your cars in the string, and you work from the farthest on back and work your way front to the engine.
Yeah, let's get those lifts done first, eh?
That's right, of course. Get the lifts done, clear up things, and then perform your drops.